Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Seitz, and today I am going to be leading a PowerPoint presentation / professional development meeting, and we're going to be talking about letter formation and the overall mechanics of writing within your classrooms. So on today's agenda, I'm going to briefly touch on a few things on here. We're going to go over the importance of writing mechanics and letter formation within your classroom, and why is this so important? We're going to go over some evidence-based strategies for teaching different things that you're already teaching within your rooms. A few different activities to implement within your classroom to really help with those writing mechanics, as well as those letter formations that we were mentioning earlier. There's going to be a 10-minute break, and at that time, you will, as a whole table, come up with 3 ways to share of how you will implement better letter formation or writing mechanics within your room. Or maybe at this time, you're going to share something that you already do within your classroom that you find works really well. Maybe you have a center that you really like to send your younger kids to, or maybe you have an outline that you really like to use with your students when they're working on a paragraph that you want to share. We are also going to go over meeting the diverse needs of learners within the classroom, and then we're going to go over some resources and some support. So, before we jump into all that though, we're going to do an icebreaker. So I want you to stop and I want you to think about your current or your past teaching experiences. And you're going to come up with 2 truths and a lie to see if your table mates can guess the lie. And you can use your paper to write this down. So I'll give you a few minutes to kind of do this, but first I will go. So here's my 2 truths and a lie, and you can see if you can guess which one the lie is. Number 1, one time, I had a student who brought her father's ashes into my classroom, and then she accidentally spilled them all over the place. Number 2, once I had a parent email me to complain that I was just teaching too much because their child was coming home exhausted every day from thinking. And number 3, I spent an entire lesson, one time, explaining the water cycle, only to realize that the diagram that I had on the board was actually how to boil noodles in a pot of water to make spaghetti, because that's how I roll. So, which one do you think is the lie? It's actually the second one that I gave, that I once had a parent email me to complain that I was teaching too much. I did have a student who brought her father's ashes in one time to my classroom, and they spilled all over the floor, and she came up to me, and she said, "Miss Sarah, my dad's all over the floor," and I couldn't figure out what was going on, and then I put 2 and 2 together and realized that she had brought her father's ashes in, so it was a very interesting day that day, to say the least. I never have forgotten it, though, but these are the stories that you cannot make up. Like, these are just the things that we are dealing with, along with trying to teach our students every day in the classroom. So let's get into it. So why is writing mechanics so important for our students? It does several things. It's going to boost their reading comprehension. It's going to help them recognize and understand sophisticated syntax within reading. It's going to enhance their speaking abilities actually as well. It's going to promote the use of complex terms in sentence structure and within their spoken language. It's going to improve organizational and study skills. I always think that this is really interesting, because you think, oh, well, writing, how are we going to be organized when we do that? But there's so much organization that goes into writing. You're paraphrasing, you're summarizing, you're making outlines. There's so many different things that go into that. So when a student has those writing mechanics down, it's actually going to help them in many different areas across the board. The importance of letter formation. If we're focusing on letter formation, that's going to support mental resources. It's going to provide authenticity, handwriting. It's going to reduce their mental effort. It's going to enable focus on higher levels of writing aspect, like content and organization. So it's kind of like what we just talked about on the previous slide, where again, those organizational skills are going to come into play here. It's going to be essential across all subjects, again, similar to the previous slide. Handwriting is fundamental for note-taking, tests, and assignments, and if we have poor handwriting, it can actually hinder the performance and the clarity of our overall ideas, because students can't get those ideas down onto paper. And then it's also going to enhance early literacy skills. Handwriting practice in early grades is linked to great reading and spelling development. Forming letters helps students connect letter shapes with sounds, reinforcing literacy skills. So this is a lot of the things that we hear maybe within a kindergarten classroom where we're saying, I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to pull down to the bottom line. Or I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to slant down. Or I'm going to pull down and around when I'm making my letter. I really like to add those influxes into my voice when I'm teaching letter formation, because then the students kind of pick up on it and then they know when I make magic letter C, I'm going to start at the top and pull down and around to the bottom. Next, evidence-based strategies to help support our students. Modeling. Model in your classrooms. Use sentence activities to teach grammar, such as sentence scrambles or sentence expansion. So that's where you're starting a sentence and then you're adding to it. A sentence scramble is obviously when you have a sentence that's all mixed up and the students have to unscramble it. That's a really fun group activity to do. You can call the students up to the board. They can figure out what the first word is going to be. What's the first word have? Capital letter. Again, you can tailor this depending on the age group you're working with. Obviously, proper nouns are going to have capital letters too, but you're probably not going to be going over proper nouns in kindergarten yet. When you're introducing a new activity, you always want to begin by modeling it for the students. So, for example, if you're doing rhyming words, you are going to model that for your students and really let them hear what that sounds like. Cat and bat, dog and bog. You're going to go over and over and over those things to make sure that the students are understanding what your goal is as a teacher. Also, setting those goals in the classroom is another really, really good idea in order to keep you focused as well as your students, so the students know what their ultimate goal is. Allowing multisensory approach to teaching letters is also another really, really good idea. I do a lot of this, again, in my younger grades where we're writing words in sand. We're using letter tiles. We're air writing to reinforce spelling. Play-Doh is always a good resource. I know it gets everywhere. It probably drives you nuts, especially if you're one of those, if you're teaching kindergarten, I feel like you either love Play-Doh or you hate it. I really like it a lot because it's good for fine motor skills. It gets kids using their hands. You can practice those letter formations. I actually have a couple examples here of things that I use within my classroom. I have the letter A. The students added little apples to the trees. I really, really love things like this because then the students are also getting to practice on those dotted lines. And I love this resource. I think it's so fun for students to do. Kindergarten students, preschool students, you can use something like this. It's very simple, but kids will remember it. So again, using your hands is always, always awesome if you're able to. Again, I know when you get into older grades, your kids might not enjoy something like that as much. Let's go over some interactive writing things as well. Engage students in interactive writing when they write sentences or short paragraphs. For older students, you're going to allow them to practice punctuation in context. So one thing that I really like to do with my older students is use photo prompts. Sometimes when my students are coming in the morning and I am working in a room, I will just stick a photo up and I will kind of give a writing prompt. For this one, as an example, what do you think this goat is doing right now? Is he playing or eating? Maybe he's talking to his friends. Write a story about this goat. You can tell us what he sees, what he likes to eat, and what adventures he has. Use describing words, and you can put up some of those describing words if you want to on the board. Again, this is going to be geared more toward your second grade students. You could probably use this for like your first grade students as well, but you're going to have to give them a lot of support within this writing. Let's move on. Activities within the classroom. Again, you're going to really want to provide multi-sensory activities to the students to practice their letter formation. Like to do a lot of songs. We always start our letters at the top. Again, this is going to be geared more toward younger students. You're going to have them practice letter formation in a sand tray, and again, are writing their letters out or using that Play-Doh that I mentioned earlier. Repetition is key. The more those students are practicing letters, the better. Large motor activities. I, again, don't know if you know him. If you do, you either love him or you hate him. But I love, love, love Jack Hartman because he goes over many, many different things. And I use these in my classroom all the time. Let me see if I can get a little bit of the video.
Say the alphabet and exercise. Lowercase a. Circle left. Straight up a little, straight down. B. Big.
So, again, I use things like that within my classroom. Now, you can run into some issues within, is Jack Hartman using the correct terminology as far as the letter formation goes? If you're concerned about that, you can still just have the video on. And you don't have to go through the whole alphabet. Maybe you just want to do 4 letters. Maybe you don't want to do A, B, C, and D. Maybe you want to fast forward. But there's multiple videos out there that are similar to Jack Hartman that go over letter formation. And I truly believe that if you have your students up and moving and practicing those letters, it's going to stick in their minds. Again, that repetition is what they need. Okay, but then what about your older sentence or your older kids? What are you going to do for those older students? So fragment and kernel sentence sorting activities, those are really, really fun to do with older kids. You're going to provide them with a sentence, a fragments, or the kernel sentence, and you're not going to capitalize anything. You're just going to kind of leave it. And the students can then say, well, in the forest is a sentence fragment. It's not a complete sentence. So then you could say, well, make it a complete sentence. What can I add to it? Oh, let's add an animal. The bear lived in a forest, okay? So then we're going to display that on the board. And then you can call the students up to write directly on the board and fix the sentence or rewrite it on their own at their seats. Graphic organizers, such as a single paragraph outline. I really like graphic organizers for students. These are awesome to use with your kids because it really, again, gets in their head. What's your topic sentence? What are your supporting things? What's your closing sentence for within that paragraph? Things like this are really going to set up your students in the future when they are writing those long papers, when they are in high school, even when they're in like 5th or 6th grade. Really, really good idea to use an outline. So I'm going to give you about a 10-minute break, and you're going to come up with those 3 ways that you can possibly implement better letter formation and writing mechanics within your own room, and then you're going to share this with the whole group. 10 minutes later. All right. I will have given them an opportunity to share. Hopefully they're coming up with some of their own things that they definitely do within their own room as well. I think that there's so many avenues that go into all of this too that I could talk about this for hours. So it's really hard to narrow this down into just like an 8 or 9 page slideshow. All right, so let's go over working with our diverse learners, okay? So to assist those students that have limited working memory, and we're going to see a lot of that, right? Where, we're getting more and more students that are low, and this is just within my district, and we're getting more and more students that have language disabilities and learning disabilities within the classroom. So how can we support those students? You can still continue to use structured frameworks like graphic organizers with those students. You just have to tailor it to how old the student is. Again, if you have a 4-year-old, you're probably not going to use a super detailed graphic organizer, but then you could use a visual schedule. I'm so sorry. You can use a visual for those students within your classroom. Those tools are going to help the writing process, and it's going to break it down into manageable parts, and it's going to allow students to focus on one aspect of writing at a time. So instead of throwing a bunch of information at a student, you're going to break it down into smaller sections. You can use things like first this, then this is what we're going to focus on today. So first we're going to practice writing the letter A, and then we're going to do a paper about the letter A, something like that. Having structure and routine within your classroom can enhance executive function and improve working memory performance. So if you're organized and you teach your students to be organized, that's how your room will be ran. When you set the expectations and your student know those expectations, you're going to have a well ran classroom where the students know what to expect and nothing's going to catch them by surprise. I think another way to really help diverse learners is pairing them up, like pairing up your younger students with your older students to provide support and modeling. So you can, again, have older students come down to your classroom maybe once a week and do 20 minutes of reading with the younger kids. I think that this is a really, really good way to support all learners, not just diverse learners. And then a few resources and support. A lot of the information that I gave you today was pulled from the book, The Writing Revolution, A Guide to Advanced Thinking Through Writing in All Subjects and Grades. It's a really, really good resource. I have used it a lot online, and I actually really want a copy of it myself because I think that it will be good to have in my classroom someday and use as a resource. Different websites like ABC Mouse are geared toward younger students, and there's games and interactive learning on there. Letter Formation, Reading A to Z has resources for both students and teachers, ideas for lessons to get your students writing more. There's a lot of different resources on that website. And then I also included how to create an outline for writing. And within that website, there are several different outlines that are already created for you that you can pull. Again, it can be a symbol outline like the one that I showed you earlier, like this one for a single paragraph. But you can also tailor that to, again, maybe whatever you need within your own classroom. And that is going to be the end of my presentation. I really appreciate you listening. I hope you're able to learn something new today about writing mechanics within your classroom and letter formation also within your room. Thank you so much and have a good evening.